Mohit and Ronak Pathak. They will perform Saraswati Vandana and Ganesh Vandana. They are our own student, Hindi USA.
Namaste everyone. My name is Mohit Pathak.
और मेरा नाम रोनक पाठक है.
Today, to begin this event, we are going to be chanting Ganesh Vandana, Saraswati Vandana, along with a few Shanti mantras. These mantras are comprised of various Vedic hymns, shlokas and chants from sources such as the Bhagavad Gita, Rig and Yajur Vedas, along with the Ganesh Stuti composed by Jagadguru Sri Adi Shankaracharya.
कर्म समाधिना ओम गणानां त्वा गणपतिं हवामहे कविं कवीनामुपमश्रवस्तम् ज्येष्ठराजं ब्रह्मणां ब्रह्मणस्पत आनशृण्वन्नोतिभिः सीदसादनम् प्रणो देवी सरस्वती वाजेभिर्वाजिनीवती धीनामवित्र्यवतु वाग्देव्यै नमः ॐ अगजाननपद्मार्कं गजाननम् अहर्निशम् अनेकदन्तं भक्तानाम् एकदन्तम् उपास्महे ॐ वक्रतुण्डमहाकाय सूर्यकोटिसमप्रभा निर्विघ्नं कुरु मे देव सर्वकार्येषु सर्वदा ॐ वक्रतुण्डमहाकाय सूर्यकोटिसमप्रभा निर्विघ्नं कुरु मे देव सर्वकार्येषु सर्वदा ॐ सरस्वती नमस्तुभ्यं वरदे कामरूपिणी विद्यारम्भं करिष्यामि सिद्धिर्भवतु मे सदा ॐ नमस्ते शारदे देवी काश्मीरपुरवासिनी त्वामहं प्रार्थये नित्यं विद्यादानं च देहि मे या श्रद्धा धारणा मेधा वाग्देवी विधिवल्लभा भक्तजिह्वाग्रसदना क्षमाभि गुणदायिनी नमामि यामिनीं नाथ लेखालङ्कृतकुन्तलां भवानीं भवसन्ताप निर्वापनसुधारथीं भद्रकाल्यै नमो नित्यं सरस्वत्यै नमो नमः वेद वेदांग वेदांत विद्यास्थानेभ्य एव च ब्रह्मस्वरूपा परमा ज्योतिरूपा सनातनी सर्वविद्यादिदेवीया तस्यै वाण्यै नमो नमः यया विना जगत्सर्वं शाश्वजीवन्मृतं भवेत् ज्ञानादिदेवीया तस्यै सरस्वत्यै नमो नमः यया च जगत्सर्वं मूकमुन्मत्तवत्सदा या देवी वागधिष्ठात्री तस्यै वाण्यै नमो नमः ॐ अजं निर्विकल्पं निराकारमेकं निरानन्दमानन्द अद्वैतपूर्णं परं निर्गुणं निर्विशेषं निरीहं परब्रह्मरूपं गणेशं भजेम गुणातीतमानं चिदानन्दरूपं चिदाभासकं सर्वगम्यानगम्यम् मुनिध्येयमाकाशरूपं परेशं परब्रह्मरूपं गणेशं भजेम जगत्कारणं कारणज्ञानरूपं सुरादिं सुखादिं गुणेशं गणेशं जगद्व्यापिनं विश्ववन्द्यं सुरेशं परब्रह्मरूपं गणेशं भजेम परब्रह्मरूपं गणेशं भजेम परब्रह्मरूपं गणेशं भजेम ॐ शुभं करोति कल्याणम् आरोग्यं धनसम्पदः शत्रुबुद्धिविनाशाय दीपज्योतिर्नमोऽस्तुते ॐ सर्वे भवन्तु सुखिनः सर्वे सन्तु निरामयाः सर्वे भद्राणि पश्यन्तु मा कश्चित् दुःखभाग् भवेत् ॐ असतो मा सद्गमय तमसो मा ज्योतिर्गमय मृत्योर्मा अमृतमगमय ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः ॐ स्वस्ति न इन्द्रो वृद्धश्रवाः स्वस्ति न पूषा विश्ववेदाः स्वस्ति नस्तार्क्ष्यो अरिष्ठनेमिः स्वस्ति नो बृहस्पतिर्दधातु ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः हरिः ॐ श्रीगुरुभ्यो नमः हरिः ॐ तत्सत्
Namaste, dear friends, distinguished guests, Mr. Devendra Singh ji, thank you for your very gracious invitation. Dr. Rajiv Malhotra ji, Madam Indrani ji, and all your distinguished guests here. I am truly delighted that we are here to launch, to discuss the book by Dr. Malhotra, Snakes in the Ganga. I have the highest of respect for Mr. Malhotra's authorship, his scholarship. Last year, we had the honor and privilege of embellishing him with our Distinguished Indologist Award, which is instituted by the Indian Council for Cultural Relations, Government of India. It was a truly our delight to celebrate his scholarship at the consulate. What amazes me is the expanse that he covers, from artificial intelligence, sociology, anthropology, politics, international relations, all captured together, and sometimes all the essence of all this different streams captured in just one sentence. That is how his understanding is, and I'm sure the book that he's written is going to do well among the readers, among people who think deeply, people who are thinking for the future, and more. Since I see a large gathering here, I am compelled to say a few words about India. We have a commitment under the visionary leadership of Prime Minister Narendra Modi to make India a developed nation by 2047. Some of you who follow economic history would know that Indian GDP in the last 25 years, so between 1998 and 2022, has grown ninefolds. So somewhere around 400 billion plus to now 3.5 trillion in 2022. If we maintain a similar trajectory in the next 25 years, you can imagine from $3.5 trillion into 9 times or thereabout, that will be the size of Indian GDP. And in this journey, we cannot do it alone. We need support from all our partners, stakeholders, from United States of America, which is a great friend of ours, from thought leaders like Mr. Malhotra, and several of our youngsters and people who have strong convening strength. We need your support. I wish Dr. Malhotra, Snakes in the Ganga, the very best, and we look forward to his deep leadership, to his thought-provoking leadership. Thank you very much, and the consulate stands ready to serve the community to its best of its ability. Thank you very much. Namaste. Dhanyawad.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous विनायक जय हे भारत भाग्य विधाता पंजाब सिंध गुजरात मराठा द्राविड़ उत्तर बंगा विंध्य हिमाचल यमुना गंगा उच्चल जगति तरंगा तव शुभ नामे जागे तव शुभ आशीष मागे गाहे तव जय गावा जनगण मंगलदायक जय हे भारत भाग्य विधाता जय 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 हे भारत माता की जय भारत माता की जय भारत माता की जय
Good morning, everybody. Namaste and greetings for this particular event. Young boys who did the Ganesh Stuti, they talked about Shatru Bodh. That's a very important thing to understand. Along with that comes Swayam Bodh, that we have to know about ourselves too. If we do not know who we are, others define us. And that's the issue that I dealt with on and on and on and on when I was speaking to the world around here about India as an investment opportunity. I have addressed questions which have ranged from sublime to stupid about us Hindus. Why so many murtis? Why not eat beef? Why not everything else about us? It's so peculiar. We are different. That's why Rajivji's book, Being Different, is so important. And we are here to listen to Rajivji, whom I have known for a long number of years. And, he has that power of writing, researching, expounding the thought that must reach your heart and mind, make you think. So I have read several of his books, and what I want to say to you is, he doesn't need an introduction to you. I don't need to say he's such a great guy, because he is. You all know that. So without much ado, I invite Rajivji to share his thoughts, not only about the snakes in the Ganga, but what threats we are facing as Indians. Where is the problem coming from? And what is the one question that I want you to focus on? Knowing what we know now, where do we go from here? That is the key question to answer. Gyan and knowledge is good, no doubt about that. Information is good, no doubt about that. What are we doing with it defines your character, defines your next stage. So without much ado, Rajivji, everybody is waiting to hear from you. Let's give him a big hand. Just one announcement. People who are asking questions, I sincerely request you to write your name as well as your contact details, because it's important to have that identity. Because if we need a more conversation on that issue, we can have. So please do not hesitate to share your name and your identity. Thank you very much. Rajivji, all yours.
Namaste, everyone. It's indeed an honor to be here before such a large, wonderful gathering. I want to start by thanking Devendra ji, who put this whole thing together, because 6 weeks ago, he was one of the guests at another event, and he stood up and said, you know what, this is only 200 people, we need to have at least 1,000 people, and I'm going to do it, and he announced the date. I think most people thought it's not possible. But I must also thank the team he put together. They have had Zooms every few days, and he's going on pushing them, making sure everybody's doing their job, and there are so many people in the team here. Then he organized a whole lot of volunteers. Then he went and got a whole lot of sponsors. I want to thank all the sponsors who made this possible. And then he went around, the most important thing is he went around to many different organizations in New Jersey from our community who generally don't give their name to support each other. I get invites to go to this mandir, I can go to one mandir and give a talk. They're always very happy, go to that mandir, this one. But they don't come together and they don't want to lend their name to somebody else's event. But he's managed to get 15 or 20 of them all sponsoring this event. And I think that's a very good beginning to bring us together. So as I was thinking of what am I going to talk about, do I talk about the problems we are facing? Do I talk about the solutions? Do I talk about my works, the books that we've done and what impact they've had? Do I talk about the next 4 books we're going to launch next month in India? What do I talk about? So it's a little bit of all of this because some of you are new and I want to reach out to you to get you interested in the work we are doing. Some of you are very knowledgeable about what all our foundation has been doing, and I want to give you what next, what is coming. So I'll give you a broad sweep, starting with the fact that this journey started for me officially, formally 30 years ago, although throughout my life I've been interested in these things. But for the first half of my adult life, I was a tech person. I came to this country to do a PhD in physics, and then I switched to computer science, and then I worked in IT in the corporate sector, then left the corporate sector, became a management consultant to the big tech companies in the world, and then started my own companies. And I left after I had created about 20 companies in many countries, and I left because I had a spiritual experience which convinced me that I should, while I'm still young, still have the energy, I should do something else rather than go making more money. So for about 30 years ago, it was in 1994 that we started our foundation, and I gave up the for-profit sector. From then till now, I decided that making more money, profit, salary, any of that is not of interest. And so since then, our foundation has been very active. The first part of the work was to give funds to other people to do the work. So I thought maybe I'll give grants to Harvard, which we gave for many years. We gave grants to Princeton University, to University of California, University of Texas, Columbia University. We started many programs. Before it was fashionable for Hindus in this country to fund this kind of research, we were doing it. But then I reached the conclusion that that's the wrong step after giving away a lot of money, that we have to do this work ourselves because they are not going to do our work. They will take the money and do whatever they feel like, which is not very favorable to us. So I was funding the wrong side. I was funding the people who are writing things not good for us and giving them money not going to change their mind. So then I became a scholar rather than a donor. So if you look up my biographies, the way they were introducing me in the talks I gave 30 years ago, they would say he's a great philanthropist, which means writing checks. And then I removed that and said, you have to talk about our scholarship. So then they started saying, okay, he's a great scholar. So the scholarship I learned on my own, because if you can learn physics and you can learn computer science and you can learn business, then you can certainly learn about your own tradition. Why not? And each of you, if you put in the time, money, energy, time mainly, or your time, to really do this tapasya of doing research about who we are and take on the opponents and study and give them response and then be brave and argue, you will become an expert. You will become a better expert than all the people who are writing about us, because they are not part of our culture and they don't have the first-hand experience the way you do. So this is all I have done, is learn from within, learn from our gurus, learn by reading the Shastra, learn by meditating, and also learn by arguing with opponents. Study what their point is and argue how to argue back. So this becoming a scholar, scholarship, as I look at it, everybody has their own expertise. My expertise is not to collect a lot of facts and present them. I am not interested in collecting a lot of facts. We have a lot of facts, but I'm interested in a new way of thinking, a new lens, a new drishti, a new framework. A new framework is more valuable than just a lot of facts. So to give you an example, our opponents have created amazing frameworks. Marxism is a framework about 200 years old, and it is not some information that he put together, but a way of thinking, how to think about society, their Marxist drishti looks at any society, any country, any period of history, and it has a certain way of analyzing and predicting what will happen and how to make changes. Then you look at another framework that they have, maybe Freudian psychoanalysis, which is a way of looking at your mind and analyzing what's right or wrong. Then another framework is feminism. That's a whole new framework of looking at life, looking at society, and on and on. So the West has created a lot of frameworks. And now we have critical race theory, wokeism. That's a framework for thinking. So we need not just factual or translate this work or that work, but we need to create our frameworks which are useful for today. And so what I have been trying to do is to understand the Vedic frameworks, because the Vedas are not just facts and mantras and chants and prayers, but they're also a framework, a metaphysics, whole framework of thinking. And I realized that there are generally two kinds of frameworks. The individual inner life, adhyatma, which in the West they call mind sciences, which means who are we, how does the mind work. The whole Patanjali Yoga Sutra is that, the whole Tantra is like that, the whole Buddhist thought is like that. All the ideas of the inner self, how voice, even vak has 4 levels. It starts from within as a idea, thought, then gradually it becomes outward. So all sorts of profound concepts that our rishis developed are frameworks. So when you look at, for instance, Jungian thought, Jung is very important, very popular in the Western world now. But when you study Jungian thought, you realize that he actually borrowed Indian thought. In the 1930s, Carl Jung used to teach Tantra in Zurich, and there are books on it. He was talking about mandala. He was talking about yoga. So people of that kind have taken Indian thought, reformulated it in their own way, removed some things which didn't fit, and distorted a little bit. I call that digestion. So they've digested our knowledge into their own way of looking at it and made it part of the Western framework. So for instance, many of you know Jordan Peterson is a very popular person in the social media, very powerful voice for the Westerners, and he calls himself a Jungian. But he has connected Jungian with Christianity and disconnected Jungian with the way it started, which was our tradition. Jung himself wrote about our tradition. He went to India, wanted to meet Raman Maharshi, didn't meet, but he wrote about his thoughts on Indian philosophy. But after he left, his students and followers removed the references to India and they turned it into something Western only. So what I'm trying to tell you is giving you just one example of hundreds where framework is more important than facts and information and factoids. So creating frameworks is what I like to do. I like to question the frameworks of other people and understand them and figure out what's good about them, what can I use, what is wrong about them. Have they borrowed it from somewhere else? Have they taken our framework and distorted it and digested it as their own? So in the process of looking at frameworks, There are two kinds. One is mind sciences, the inner frameworks, and one is social sciences, which is about outside. Social sciences has to do with society, Jati, Rashtra. There are a lot of frameworks like that in our tradition that we don't use. People just don't use. But when, one of the books I'm working on, and there's so many books I've still got to write, is called Rashtra. And when you look at I went to so many scholars and said, tell me what is written about Rashtra in our texts, Shastras. And nobody done a comprehensive survey. Somebody told me, I know about this is what it said in Mahabharata, and somebody says, I know this is what it says in Dharma Shastra. But I said, no, I want you to do a whole study on the whole origin of Rashtra idea. Where does it first occur? Now, it took me many years of searching, finding, talking to a lot of scholars. And I found there are 33 references to the word Rashtra in the Vedas. Vedas use the word Rashtra. And I'm surprised that nobody has done there should have been many dissertations, many doctoral, PhDs on the idea of Rashtra from our tradition. But there isn't one. I mean, I've had a discussion with some friends in the RSS. I consider them friends. They are good friends, people at the senior level. And the question I asked is, why is Rashtra, as interpreted by RSS, after all their name starts with Rashtra, Rashtra Swayam Sevak Sangh, and you would think that they'll be experts on Rashtra. But when I asked the question on Rashtra, it was sort of a modern concept of nation, borrowed from the West. But Rashtra is a very ancient concept in the Rig Veda, from the Rig Veda and the other Vedas. So I realized that nobody has really looked at that. We need to look at that. And so that's one of the frameworks I'm developing, framework of Rashtra. And by the way, Rashtrapati is a wrong name for President of India. The right name would be Rajyapati, because when you look at the Vedic texts, they talk about Rashtra and they talk about Rajya. Head of state would be Rajyapati, because he's head of state. That would be Rajyapati. Rashtrapati would be a different kind of person. So we've lost our frameworks, is what I'm saying. These are important for us to rediscover, bring them in the context of modern intellectual property. So rediscovering the ancient frameworks, articulating them in modern vernacular, modern jargon, modern terminology, and putting modern intellectual property turning it into modern intellectual property, useful for today. That is the kind of thing I'm trying to do. And these frameworks have an encounter with the Western frameworks. Our frameworks have an encounter with the Western frameworks because the Western way of thinking is different. Their mind sciences are different, their social sciences are different. And when there's a confrontation, when you bring your knowledge to them, and they are the dominant culture, they have the Harvards and the Princeton universities, and they have all the think tanks, and our own people are into using the Western framework. When you have this kind of encounter, there's a pushback. There's a pushback because you are pushing people out of their comfort zone. Not only the people who made these frameworks in the West, but Indians who've taken them over, borrowed them, who are thinking like that. Most of our people, from top politicians down to gurus also, education system also, certainly media, are using Western frameworks. Even Hindu dharma has been reformulated to fit Western frameworks. We use words like mythology, myth. We use, which is that there's no Hindu mythology, it's itihas. And there's a difference between itihas and myth. We talk about idols, but idol is a whole different concept from the murti. We talk about Hindu gods, but the devatas are a different idea from the Judeo-Christian concept of gods, So when we talk about soul instead of atma, but there's a whole difference there. We talk about Shakti, we translate as energy. But this electricity, which is energy, is not the same thing as Shakti, because Shakti, it's energy, but it is intelligence. And this is just energy. It is also conscious. It is also person. So this personal, conscious intelligence with energy is a whole lot more than just energy. So, we are using Western frameworks all the time. This is a major issue that is a common feature in the work that I like to do, is study what are the frameworks people are using, not argue about little data here and there, but what is the framework, what is their drishti, what is their lens, and what about it, what's valid about it, what's not valid about it, give them credit where due, but also question them. And what would be our rishis' view? What would be their framework? Not shloka here and there or something, but what is their framework of thinking? And if you really want to understand Indian thought, you must understand the brilliant frameworks that the rishis have created, which most of those frameworks are just sort of obscure and people are not using. For instance, Ayurveda is a whole framework of the human body. It's a framework. It is not that I will take this medicine, this Ayurvedic medicine is better than that. It's not like that. It's the whole framework of who is the body, what is the body, what is disease, how it starts, what to do about it. All of that is different framework. So there are frameworks in mathematics, frameworks in astronomy that are very distinct from our culture. There are frameworks of grammar and language which have been Patanjali's, or Panini's grammar, Ashtadhyay, became the basis for all European grammars in the 1800s. They learned this and they started, formalizing the grammar of German and this and that based on their study of Sanskrit grammar. So if you look at the West study of Indian frameworks, it resulted in many, many influences on the West, including Christianity. Modern Christianity in the last 200 years adopted a lot of ideas which were not there in the earlier Christianity. And you'll find this in botany, you'll find this in medicine, you'll find this in theories of mind and meditation and all these kind of things. So if we want to protect our civilization, we must protect the frameworks. Ultimately, the clash of civilizations is a clash of frameworks, because the framework that you use will influence how you are thinking. If you're a lawyer, the jurisdiction under which you will fight is so important, because if you say we'll resolve disputes under the laws of the United States, state of New Jersey, versus somebody who says any disputes will be resolved in Beijing under the laws of China, it's a different framework. And if you agree to resolve it under their framework, it will be a very different outcome. So the legal jurisdiction and the type of law determines the outcome of your thinking. The same way in physics there are different frameworks. Newtonian framework and Einstein framework are different. So my research when I started becoming a scholar, coming from physics and computer science, this is how I was thinking. That in computer science, you learn that whoever controls the operating system has the power, not who controls the apps. So, this is why the iOS from Apple and the Windows from Microsoft, neither one is going to say, I'll surrender to the other, because then they're out of business. And these two and Android are fighting for market share, because if you have a bigger footprint, a bigger install base of your operating system, then you have that much more market. Apps you can put on anybody, but the one who controls the platform. And similarly on social media platform, there's competition on which platform you're going to use, because that gives them power. Are you going to use TikTok as a platform or some other, equivalent or a competitor? That will determine the outcome for those people. So in the same sense, civilization is a platform. Civilization is like an operating system, because in which framework of civilization are you going to argue? When people say there is no social justice in China, the Chinese say, no, you're using the wrong framework, you're using a Western framework, we're going to use our framework. We don't want to discuss about human rights according to Western framework, we want to discuss human rights according to our framework, and according to our framework we're doing very well, because we've advanced so much, we brought human rights, we've removed poverty, we brought education, we are becoming one of the powerful countries in the world. When we look at the collective rather than the individual, which is what our frameworks want in China, then we are doing very well. And you guys are not doing well. So the Chinese have become very good at fighting for their framework. We have not done that because in India, from the, I'm sorry if the Consul General is here, I'm sorry, the Ministry of External Affairs, the diplomats, they're using the Western framework of how to argue, how to reason. We haven't gone deep enough into our own Arthashastra and Dharmashastra to revive our framework about Rashtra, about foreign policy, about strategy. So in the social sciences and political science domain also, we have a lot of frameworks. And in the mind sciences, of course, we have a lot of frameworks and we need to revive these. And when we are reviving the frameworks, Buddhism is part of it, Jainism is part of it. They are not separate frameworks, they're just part of it. And we have to stop this business about, this guy is Buddhist and I'm Hindu and all that. I have to tell you this. My own journey, intellectual journey, has relied hugely on studying, of course, the Upanishads and the Gita, but also Buddhist thought, Madhyamic Buddhist thought. Also, I studied Sri Aurobindo's interpretation of Vedas, which is very different. Also Tantra. So you have to study many ways of thinking in order to figure it out. And every time I got deeper and deeper into Buddhist thought, I would go back and get more meaning out of our Upanishads. Because the way the Buddhists are looking at it, you don't have to agree with it, but they do have some ideas, some points that open up our own knowledge deeper. So Indian frameworks is the central theme in all the work that I have been doing so far. Now I want to, and I also explain the frameworks can be broken into the inner sciences or mind sciences and outer sciences or social sciences. I'll tell you how I got into the mind sciences. Around the year 2000 or thereabouts, IIT Kharagpur was going to have its 50th anniversary. So a year or so before, they were looking for grants to hold some conferences. And they sent a grant application to Infinity Foundation, my foundation, and I asked them for details. One of the conference themes caught my attention. It was going to be on psychology, mind science psychology. And when I asked for details, there was not a single Indian model being included. It was all Freud, Jung, all these kind of things they were going to talk about. So I wrote to the person who had applied for this grant and said that I will fund the entire conference on psychology and mind sciences if there is at least one panel on Indian models, which are very important. I still have a copy of his reply, the lady's reply. It said, "Sir, we are not chauvinists, we are scientists, we can't do all this kind of stuff." So they thought I'm some kind of a chauvinist, asking for Indian mind sciences to be included. So I wrote back saying, but we have Patanjali Yoga Sutra, that is about mind. We have Tantra, that's about mind. We have Sri Aurobindo, that's about mind. These are some great thoughts about mind. All of Buddhism is about mind. There's nothing chauvinist. And she would say, "Sir, but nobody here will accept it." This is what 20 years ago. Now, of course, they're all talking about these things. So what I did is, I knew they have a white complex. So I'll bring in some white people and they'll accept. So one person I talked to was Bob Thurman, who was a head of religious studies in Columbia, a very good friend of mine, and the head of Tibet House. And he's a Buddhist, he's no nonsense Buddhist, he's no problem. So I said, "Bob, will you go to India and talk about Indian mind sciences?" He said, "Yes, of course, Buddhism is mind sciences, and it all comes from India." I said, "But you have to make sure you explain it like that. You don't try to westernize it and replace the Sanskrit with English. You have to show the Indian origins." He said, "Of course." Then I had a person we were giving grants to in Cambridge University. He had written a book on translating and interpreting yoga. And so I asked him the same thing. I said, "Are you willing to go?" He said, yeah, I'll go. And then there was a Sri Aurobindo follower. He was in one of the, he's a psychiatrist in New York. And he's a great follower of Sri Aurobindo. And I had told him, "Will you go and talk about Sri Aurobindo's mind sciences?" He said, "Yes." And then a friend, Stuart Sowatsky, who's a Tantra scholar and a psychologist and so on. He now lives in Yogi Amrit Desai's ashram in Florida. So I called him, I said, Stuart, I've always told you that you need to give back to the mother civilization that taught you all these things, and this is your chance. Are you willing to go to India and do that? He said, yeah, yeah. So I got each of them to write me an abstract, a proposal of their talk. I sent it to IIT Kharagpur saying, these guys will be my panel. If you are willing to put them, I'll fund it. Immediately they accepted it, because these are white people after all. So must be okay. Now it's okay. Now it's okay. We don't have to be embarrassed because some white people coming and saying that we're good people. We are good because white people are putting the tappa on us. So they went and they got a standing ovation. And the Kharagpur people wrote to me that this is the most popular panel of the whole conference. So we thought, we got an idea. So then invites came from Kerala Psychology Association. I told these guys, go, I'll fund you, go, because we want them to see. Then they got an invite from Pondicherry. They thought, wow, these guys, we should invite them. Indian felt proud, everybody wanted to invite them. So Infinity Foundation for 10 years, we kept sending these people, and we kept adding more people also. Finally, the big climax was when Delhi University Psychology Department, which was considered to be very ultra-left and very secular and stuck in their ways, when they had a conference, because we sent these people, and that conference was called Indian Theories of Mind. Indian Theories of Mind. At that time, Sunit Verma was a very young assistant professor. He's now, I think, head chairman of the department or something. He's very senior. But this is 20 years ago. He was a very junior guy. And he was a Sri Aurobindo follower. He was championing my ideas, taking it to his seniors, call me and say, I think this guy will support it, that guy will shoot it down, I'm too junior, maybe we write to this. I mean, all this strategy we had to do for the internal politics, just to get Indian theories of mind into the Indian universities. That's what the fight was about. I'm just giving you an example of the kind of things we've done. So then after that, we created an association of Indian psychology. And the 200 or plus scholars would come, and every year we would have a conference somewhere in India. We would sponsor it, and they would write proceedings. And so this is how this whole idea of Indian approach to psychology became a part. Now it's part of the curriculum. Now in every university, they have, when they're teaching psychology, there is also an option to talk about Indian ideas of psychology. So this decolonizing the framework is not easy work to do. It takes a lot of effort and courage, and so that is what has taken me many years to keep doing. So I wanted to make sure I don't forget a few things. So this mind sciences, right now, a book I'm doing on Indian mind sciences and the influence on the West, I've drafted, it haven't been published. 3 volumes are just on Buddhist influences. 3 volumes, 1100 pages drafted, just on the Buddhist part. So I have to yet add the Tantra part, the other many things part. And then I started realizing that many of the leading edge, cutting edge science institutions, technology institutions in the United States are actually taking Indian mind sciences and appropriating it. One of them is Harvard. Harvard has a Benson Institute started by Herb Benson. Now, Herb Benson is an interesting person. In 1970 or 71, he just passed away a few years ago in his 90s. But in 1970-71 time frame, he came across Maharishi Mahesh Yogi's transcendental meditation, and it was having effects on cardiology. So, Lakshmanji's field. The TM people, the Transcendental Meditation people, were the first to publish report after report that when you do this meditation for 20 minutes a day, morning and evening, it'll reduce your blood pressure, it'll reduce this, that, improve cardiology, all of that. And this was very big news in that time. Huge news. My God, without taking medicine, just doing this, you can reduce. So it created a big sensation. And sure enough, Westerners always go and want to capture it. So Herb Benson started a movement of his own, claiming that he's come up with these ideas. And in his movement, he replaced Om with One. He said you need to say one, and you don't get rid of this Om because Hindu stuff and all, and you'll get the same benefit. And so he started doing some research using the TM technique, what you do, how many minutes you do, you close your eyes, what you do when thoughts come, what you do when sensations come. All that technique he copied, but he replaced the mantra. And so he claimed that he's got similar results. And then he started a movement called the relaxation response. And he became a very big shot at Harvard. He got millions of dollars of grants from the National Institute of Mental Health, National Institute of Health, all these places, and the big hospitals in Massachusetts General Hospital, all of them. And for the last 30, 40 years, they've been doing research, patenting it, and calling it their own. No trace of transcendental meditation left. But the TM people are very angry that he's done this, but they're too embarrassed to come out and fight because he's very powerful. So I said, I'll do the fighting. You give me the data. So they put me in touch with a man who is also now very old. He was doing his PhD. He is a Maharishi follower. He's a white guy, Maharishi follower, very loyal. And he's a doctor. He was a young fellow doing his doctorate on transcendental meditation effects on cardiology and health and whatnot. And he was the one who Herb Benson approached, wanted to collaborate, and they wrote joint papers in which Herb Benson was a junior author. This guy who was TM for Maharishi was a senior author. So that's the smoking gun. So when later on Herb Benson started saying it's all original, got nothing to do with India, got nothing to do with TM, I discovered the original papers where Herb Benson was involved were on TM in collaboration with the other guy. So I made a big deal out of it. I brought it out publicly and saying that this whole legacy, this whole claim to originality is fraud, because this guy actually borrowed from India and he doesn't want to acknowledge it, and now he's become a very big shot, and so he doesn't want to acknowledge it. So this created a controversy. Of course, I went and interviewed him before he passed away, he wanted to come out and say all these nice things. So I have on tape, we haven't put it out there, but we have on tape long interviews where he's acknowledging his debt to India, finally. So you see, from being a philanthropist donor to becoming a scholar and creating our own frameworks was what I started doing. And then the next stage was that, hey, I can't do all this alone and I'll be gone one day. So we need a team to continue the work. So I need to hire people, hire scholars. So we started with volunteers, and they are doing good work. But then I realized that when you hire really good people, pay them money, pay them salary, and we have about a dozen of them in India and 3 or 4 team people in the US, which is costing us which is why we need the funding. So doing it this way, we're creating a team. And when you're creating a team and you're creating so much original knowledge about frameworks, then you are creating a school of thought. Marxism is a school of thought. Freudian psychoanalysis is a school of thought. Critical race theory is a school of thought. Feminism and gender studies is a school of thought. You see, we need to have Vedic mind sciences and Vedic social sciences in the modern context as a school of thought on par with all the other schools of thought, and we have to be able to export this by first establishing it for ourselves. That is the vision that I got when I started doing all this work. So the vision I have is that there are 3 things you need to create a school of thought. You need research, you need to mentor young people to continue after you, otherwise when you're gone, it's gone. You cannot be just a one-man show, you have to reproduce into the next generation. And you need an institution which has got a long life, which will continue this for the next 100 years. So if you have knowledge, content, original research turned into frameworks, which is my job, and then you bring in other people to continue this further, and then you have an institutional mechanism, that becomes a school of thought, and that can become part of the curriculum. You can have one day, you can have MA degrees, BA degrees, these BS degrees in these kind of topics. Right now, you go and study liberal arts in India, social sciences in India. 100% of social sciences is Western models, Western frameworks. The IAS exam on sociology is full of Western. You look at the NCERT books, I'm doing a critical review of NCERT books in India on social studies, is all Western models. And the Western models start with Marxism as the foundation. No Vedic model. So when the NEP, the National Education Policy 2020 came out, I like the STEM part. They want to encourage science, technology, all those kind of things are very good. I like it. But in the they want to encourage liberal arts. And the liberal arts they're encouraging are not Vedic liberal arts, but Harvard's liberal arts. This is a very serious problem. And they have brought liberal arts into IITs and IIMs. They want to bring liberal arts into medical education. Idea being to make the technocrat more well-rounded. That's very good. But well-rounded with what? So you're finding that now some of the worst opponents that I'm having to fight are in IIT Delhi, IIT Madras, because they are deeply involved with Marxist liberal arts models, and they've applied those Marxist liberal arts models to Dalits, to minorities, so they've come up with this whole Marxist, ultra-leftist view of Indian civilization. And this is really the problem. And to flaw with the NEP 2020 is that they should have first developed the Vedic social sciences and then said, okay, these are the social sciences we are going to introduce in all these colleges, without first developing our own platform and our own foundation, our own framework. Just opening the door to liberal arts means that all these guys from the Western education, all the Indians who got their training in these kind of Western frameworks are the ones who are capturing the universities in India, making the things even worse. So the problems that we are fighting here have been exported there. So now it's going to happen in a bigger way in India itself, which is not helping us but making it even worse. So that's the tragedy of not having funded and supported all these decades all these decades the proper study of Vedic social sciences and Vedic mind sciences, and just importing whatever the West produces. Some of the stuff that the West produces is Indian knowledge digested into Western frameworks and sent back to India. So we take it as Indian. Like, for example, you've heard of emotional intelligence. The Harvard guy wrote this book on emotional intelligence, and it's considered a brilliant breakthrough, and all these corporate people in India invite him, and he gives talks about emotional intelligence. Okay? And what you don't know is that when he was doing his doctorate in Harvard, he writes, and these are old archives you can dig up, and I have dug up. He writes that he's doing research on Indian meditators and Indian mind sciences he's doing, and he comes up that the idea of IQ, as West has, is very limited. There is also other dimensions of intelligence. There are many parts of intelligence, and what IQ is only one part, and he wants to expand IQ, and he brings in emotional intelligence. But he says that during his doctorate, people told him that if you bring in Indian religion, nobody will give you a PhD, so he got rid of that. It was basically plagiarizing. In a sense, he's plagiarizing because he's not quoting the sources. He's borrowing from sources, he's dishonest, not quoting them. I've confronted him, and now he started giving little bit of lip service once in a while. But the Indians themselves don't know that the whole emotional quotient and emotional intelligence movement came out of Indian thought. If you know anything about Sri Aurobindo, one of his models is called multiple planes and parts of being. if you read his book, The Life Divine, a major chapter is called Planes and Parts of Being. And he says that the being, which means us, the inner being, has many planes and many parts in each plane. And yoga consists of looking at all these planes and parts and unifying them. And that is really the essence of this whole Maslow came up with the Maslow pyramid, which is very famous. And this other guy came up with emotional intelligence, which is also very famous. But these are based on planes and parts of being. These are based on that. So the ideas from India travel, they get digested, and then they get distorted, then they are exported back to us, and some of them are actually causing us harm because they're not authentic. So I have a 10-volume book series planned, which is not complete, but I'm going to publish it. So this is on the history of digestion. So there's a volume on life sciences, for example, botany. You would think that botany, what do we have to do with botany? You go to Harvard, in the Rare Books Archive, I was shown a book in Dutch, which is considered the earliest work in botany in Europe. And that book became very famous, was translated to all the European languages sometime in the 1600s. And this is a book quite well known. And Harvard has one of the original copies of this book. And in this book, when they are talking about different plants, they actually have a cutting of that plant's leaves stuck there. And they are describing how it grows and what is its value and all that. So this is a book on botany, one of the earliest books in Western botany. But guess what? On the first page, this is what the guy showed me, and I didn't know the Dutch language, but he translated it for me. But they would not let me do a scan. I'm still looking to get a scan. In the very first page, it says, this is a translation of such and such book from Malayalam. This is what it says. This is what it says. So, the whole origin of botany, because we all know there was a British East India Company and there was a French East India Company, but many of you don't know that there was a Dutch East India Company, there was a Danish East India Company, and do you know there was a Swiss East India Company? Swiss East India Company. These didn't last, they were not as powerful, the other ones lasted. So the head of the Dutch East India Company, the director of the East India Company, his brother or brother-in-law was a botanist who was very interested in going to India and getting knowledge out of the farmers. They were growing these herbs, these Ayurvedic people, getting knowledge from them, taking clippings. And there's a very famous botanical garden in Holland where they have a plaque I've seen where it says that it is dedicated, it is started by this guy. This guy he was the head of the Dutch East India Company. He started this. So that's the origin of botany in Europe. And you have to know these things. So when I'm doing this 10-volume series on digestion, there's a volume on life sciences. Another example of life sciences I'll give you, which is more modern. I was at this 7-star hotel, which is above Rishikesh. I don't know what its name is called. Anand Spa. It's a huge, very luxury hotel. And I went with 2 American school teachers from Princeton Day School because we were funding a summer tour of India for religious studies people in Princeton Day School. My wife used to go as a chaperone. And they said that before we take students, you need to take teachers and make sure it's okay. So I took 2 teachers and we went all over various spiritual places. On the way to Gangotri, I went with these guys. We spent some time staying at this Anand Spa, this really big resort. So we're doing this Ayurveda massage, Ayurveda treatment, which is known for that. So I was having this Ayurveda treatment, and this guy, who's the person doing the treatment, comes and says, "Sir, we are using Aveda." So I said, "What is Aveda?" He said, "Sir, it means Ayurveda, but Ayurveda is obsolete, now it is Aveda." This is what he's telling me. So I said, "I never heard of it." So what is this? Who is this Aveda? He says, "For Ayurveda, it's Ayurvedic spa, we're doing Ayurveda only, but now Aveda is better." He's telling me that. So after my treatment's over, I went and talked to the manager and they said, yeah, we're selling Ayurveda products. They had all these Ayurveda products there. So I bought them in order to know who the heck is doing all this. This is a very early, this is like, a couple decades back. So I took all this, these packages, I brought to the United States, looked up where are they, who are they. I found the Ayurveda company had been purchased by Estee Lauder for a very large sum of money. And now it's a multi-billion-dollar, it's the largest brand selling plant products, herbal products for skin care, for these sort of things. It's a huge brand. If women would know that you go, Ayurveda is a very big brand. But most people don't know that Ayurveda is Ayurveda. So then I looked at who started it. The story is that there were two Americans, they were hippies, and they used to go every year to India and meet their guru and do all that stuff. And one of them fell ill, and some Ayurvedic doctor cured him. And he was very impressed. So in future trips, they would bring one suitcase full of Ayurvedic medicines to sell and recover their flight, their plane fare. They started as poor hippies, bringing Ayurvedic stuff, bootlegging it. And then it sold very well. Then they started importing. Then they started repackaging it here with nice branding, Ayurveda branding. And the first Ayurveda newsletter was just a 4-page newsletter saying you can cure this, that. We have this Ayurveda product. And it is from India, it's from the Himalayas, all that exotic stuff they were doing. So that is how Ayurveda started. Then they hired 4 Vaidyas, 4, to come and teach them how to grow these herbs, how they are grown, how they are used. So these 4 Vaidyas came, and actually there was an interaction between Maharishi's Vaidyas and Ayurveda company trying to steal a lot of ideas from the Maharishi people also. So they were very clever in marketing. They started growing Kerala herbs in California. They bought a huge farm and they're growing herbs. And now it belongs to them. They don't need India anymore. And they are come up with this great Ayurveda company. It's now a multi-billion-dollar company. About 20 years ago, I was giving grants to Santa Barbara, University of California, Santa Barbara, and they were very proudly took me for a tour of this Ayurvedic farm. They said, you'll be very proud, we are promoting Ayurveda. So I found that this huge Ayurvedic herbs were being grown by the Ayurveda company. So I said, why should I be proud? They've stolen our stuff. And you are saying we should be proud. They're not paying any royalty. They don't even acknowledge where it came from. Because they've stolen our stuff and they're growing it, you are saying we should be proud. They said, no, you should be proud that we are popularizing your culture. Because if we call it Indian, nobody will buy it. If we call it American, they'll buy it. This he's telling you. So I wrote an article, this way back, I wrote an article that when, I think it was King George V or one of those kings, was asked, why are you wearing the Kohinoor? He said, the people of India should be very proud that the emperor has chosen their diamond to be worn on his head. So that's the inferiority complex our people have, that because the white guy has now taken over Ayurveda, now he's selling it, we should be very proud, we should thank him. So these are the examples of the 10 volumes in digestion that I'm going to do. There'll be a volume on mathematics and astronomy, there'll be a volume on life sciences, a volume on linguistics, a volume on philosophy. Many of you probably don't know that when you think of Western philosophy, they think of the big philosophers like Herder and Kant and Hegel, but they learned a lot from Indian thought. That's a whole volume I have on the Indian origins of Western philosophy, modern philosophy. When they talk about the influences of India, they really start very late. They talk about British Orientalists and what they learned from India and brought it here to the Western world. What they don't discuss is much earlier, when Indian knowledge traveled to China, much earlier than the European coming here. Jesuits from France were missionaries in China, and they were bringing knowledge back from China, which they called Buddhist knowledge, and that is acknowledged in their history. But a lot of this so-called Buddhist knowledge was actually Vedic knowledge, because what the Chinese took was Buddhist, Vedic, it was all mixed up. There was no separation between those days. It was all the same. What you learned in Nalanda was Vedic, Buddhist, all this combined stuff. That is what the Chinese were taking, and that is what the Jesuits were bringing back into Europe and repackaging it, and it was influencing Western thought. A lot of Western thought was influenced in that way. So, these are the kind of projects that I like to do. And now you can see that this would be controversial. You can see that a guy like me would be controversial. To go to Herb Benson at Harvard and say, this is Maharishi Mahesh Yogi's material, appropriated. To go to the Center of Western Philosophy at Princeton University and say, what you're teaching about Hegel and Kant, you should acknowledge the Indian sources, and here I have proof. They don't want to hear it. In Princeton University, they were teaching a course called History of Universities. And they start with the European, the Greek, Alexandria. And I said, earlier than Alexandria was Takshashila. Earlier than that. Much earlier than that. In fact, it's written about. So the professor says that I can only go with evidence. I don't know. You are telling me. How do I know? So I looked in the Princeton University archive. They have 3 volumes on the history of Takshashila and the history of Nalanda in their own library. So I took it out and gave it to him, and I said, why don't you include this in your curriculum? So you see, this only creates more enemies for me. You create more people enemies. They say, let's get rid of this guy. Then there's a course on the history of political thought in Princeton University. Woodrow Wilson School, very prestigious. They've changed the Woodrow Wilson School name now. So that school is one of the most prestigious, teaching political thought. So I said, why don't you teach Arthashastra, which is one of the origins of political thought in the world. Why don't you teach political thought as conveyed in the Mahabharata? Because it's political thought, a lot of debate about these issues. Don't want to touch that as part of the history of knowledge and the history of ideas. In fact, the Arthashastra is also one of the original works on economics. It is not just political thoughts. You should know that. Arthashastra has the principles of economics. In fact, one guy, Balbir Singh, or I don't know, I've forgotten his name, I used to work with and interact with him at one time. He's written a book on the Arthashastra and modern economics, doing a comparative study. So this is how you empower the next generation. You teach them Indian contributions to the world is not just future we will do it, and today we are teaching yoga and all that. This is a very old story, and we have to correct the history of the world, and the history of India also we have to correct. Because when they are writing the history of India, they're only talking about how invaders come and they kill this guy and they conquer that guy. They are not talking about the export of Indian knowledge to all over the world. Then through the Arabs, mathematics goes to algebra, mathematics, geometry goes to Europe. They're not talking about it. So all this is the history of digestion that I was referring to, and you can see why 10 volumes is barely enough. Now, before I close, I want to tell you a little bit about how the people often say that the things you're writing are very fine research and all, but very few people will read it. You need to popularize it and so on. I understand that. But there are 5 levels of Infinity Foundation projects. We call them A, B, C, D, E. Track A is original research that I do. And I produce books, and I'm going to produce 20 more. That's my goal. Produce a whole library of research. Track B is to train young students, people are mentoring, to continue this research. So now we are introducing 2 of the 4 books are written by my people I've mentored. So here, this book, 10 Heads of Ravan. There are 10 articles written by 10 different young scholars of Infinity Foundation. Ravan is a metaphor. Ravan is a metaphor for, a person who's against society and who's dangerous and who's attacking our society. But this is a metaphor for modern Ravan, is the intellectual Ravan. And the 10 heads are people like Romila Thapar, people like Irfan Habib, people like So you have Ramchandra Guha is one of the heads. Shashi Tharoor is one of the heads. And there are Americans. There's Wendy Doniger. There's Audrey Truscay. There is Sheldon Pollock. These kind of people also. So a year before COVID, we were having our annual retreat in Rishikesh, and I had done a 2-minute animated cartoon on 10 heads of Ravan. I hired some cartoonist, animation guy, and he put Ravan with those 10 heads, and they were like cartoon version of these people. And each head would pop up, and then he would say some nasty things about us. And then the next head would pop up and say some nasty things about us. And this cartoon became very popular. So then the idea came, why don't we turn these into actual a book? And so this is a book where each head of Ravan has been critiqued by one of our people. And they're learning to be a good scholar. There's no insult allowed. They're not allowed to become emotional. They're not allowed to slander. It's all about the work of that person. They're basically saying this is what that person has written, this is what he's famous for, and this is what our response is. So it's a very academic style response to these 10 people, okay? And in the introduction, the only thing I've written is introduction to introduce. And I've said that we honor these people as being so important that it's worth our while to criticize them. So you see, track A is I do the work, track B is I mentor others to do the work, and part of doing the work is they have to stand up and defend it. They have to stand up and talk about it. They have to face the anger and the opposition, and people will make fun of them and bring them down, and they have to stand their ground. The fact that our work is controversial because we are taking people out of their comfort zone. Not that we are doing anything wrong or harmful, but we are just telling the truth. We are convinced of the truth, but people don't want to hear it for whatever reason. Means that we must hold our ground. There is a fight or flight option. Either you run from controversy and people calling you names and so on. Either you run or you stand your ground and fight. If you stand your ground and fight in such a situation, that is what we call intellectual kshatriyata. That is the definition of intellectual kshatriyata. So these are 10 intellectual kshatriyas. Each of them has taken one topic, who is a world-famous, powerful person, much more powerful than our scholar, who has got an old history, a lot of following, a lot of limelight, and our scholar is a nobody. And this nobody scholar has got the audacity and the scholarship, so all of them have taken 3 years. This book has been developed for 3 years, and we're going to launch it next month. The other one is artificial intelligence. I wrote a book, and now a team of 8 or 9 people are writing The Power of Future Machines. That is different articles. I've only written the introduction. So I'm trying to tell you that this vision of track B is coming to fruition. And we are also having conferences called Swadeshi Indology Conference, where we bring in other people to come and speak, to continue the work. So each of my books gets turned into a conference, and based on the conference, other people write their work on it, and we turn it into videos and documentaries so that it is not just my work. I may have started something, but other people take it over. It's their work also. That's track B. Track C is we are turning this knowledge into online courses, e-learning, online animated courses. So we are developing videos and making courses. So the book, Being Different, which became a big hit a dozen years ago, many of you know about it. You can probably get copies of it here. That has become a course which many tens of thousands of people have already taken, and now we are making courses on the other books. So that's track C. For people who want to read a big book, they want to take a course. Track D is when we go into take this knowledge into even simpler forms, like we have 2-minute videos on Twitter, hundreds of them, 2 minutes each. Snakes in the Ganga, we got for 50, 60 videos on that already, little 2-minute videos each, giving a very sharp, strong one point in 2 minutes. And then we are also getting very active we have very active in social media. That is track D, which means popular level. People who are not going to read, but they like to be in social media. How do we get the messages out to social media? And then track E is I'm training intellectual Kshatriya workshops. and giving them a certificate that, okay, you become intellectual Kshatriya. So, the first intellectual Kshatriya conference, workshop was conducted in Toronto many years ago. And then somebody from Ramakrishna Mission actually in Bangalore invited us to conduct a workshop. We conducted a workshop there. So we are often going around conducting workshops to train young people how to think like us. So the idea is that I'll be gone, but through this A, B, C, D, E system, we'll create a whole, future generation. We will have a body of knowledge for them. We'll have trained these people, and we'll have built an institution. So that is the vision of Infinity Foundation. So when somebody asks, are you willing to fund, which somebody will later on, that is the funding we need. None of that funding is for me. Thank God I don't need any funding. I don't draw any salary, don't make any money out of it every year. In fact, we're giving. But I'm okay. However, these young people for the next generation need to be paid. They need to be paid, and the funding is entirely for those kind of expenses. I will give you, before concluding, I want to give you a few examples of high impact that we've had. I told you about the mind sciences and the IIT Kharagpur. I gave you that example and so on. But I will tell you some very big impacts we've had, because people want to know, how does writing books make a difference? You know, in the Hindu tradition, there's no pope, but we have the Shankaracharya mutts. And the leading one is Sringeri. The one in Sringeri is considered the leading one, and the one in Kanchi. So some years ago, a very dear friend of mine, very innocently and naively, told me that he's part of fundraising in Columbia University to become the center for teaching Shankaracharya in the Western world. And everybody likes, wow, they'll teach Shankaracharya. But you know, I don't accept anything unless I've read the details. So I wanted to read the details, and the details were that Sheldon Pollock will be appointed chair, and it will be his decision who he appoints, what they teach, who the scholars are. And Sheldon Pollock, I know, he's a die-hard ultra-Marxist, and his idea of Sanskrit is completely the opposite of the spirituality that we think Sanskrit is. He thinks Sanskrit is full of social abuse, abuse against women. His view on Ramayana is it's a social abuse system, and all this mantra is mumbo jumbo, and all kind of brainwashing. So he's a learned man, but like even Ravana was learned man. You can be learned, but learned in a strange way. So I said, I don't support this. And I started meeting Sheldon Pollock to tell him very openly that I have problems with you. So Sheldon Pollock came to Princeton to see me. We had a morning breakfast and coffee together. And then he invited me to New York. I went to New York to see him. We had several meetings. And I was very open. I'm writing this book, and I'm going to critique you. But I want to know what your views are. So he said, I have spent so many decades entirely dedicated to writing on Sanskrit. How could I hate if I'm spending my whole life? So I said, a biologist who's studying a particular bacteria all his life does not want to help it. He wants to kill it, but he has to study it. And I said that you send your spies to study the other side, not because you love them, but you want to understand how to compromise them. And the Europeans sent all these scholars and anthropologists to study, even now these guys go to Marxists and Maoists and missionaries, they go to villages to study them, to find out how they were vulnerable. So the fact that you studied all your life is not, you have to look at the content you've produced. He was shocked because no Indian ever, he thought that this will floor a person, because every time there is a doubt, he stands up and says, I learned it under this teacher, I went to this university, I studied Sanskrit, and I stayed so many years, and I wear my dhoti, and he's got a tilak and all that stuff, and every Indian is floored. I was the first guy who told him that this is bullshit, it doesn't mean anything. We can tell you that. India Abroad had made him the Man of the Year. There's a special issue from India Abroad. I have a copy of it. I'll show it to you. He was Man of the Year given the award by India Abroad as sort of the big hero of the year, because look at this man, he writes books on Sanskrit. And they had a picture of him at the Shringeri ashram wearing a dhoti and all that stuff. Okay? So now imagine how hard my job is to take on a guy like that. When our own millionaires and multimillionaires and billionaires in New York, some of them very dear friends, have put out a multi-million-dollar project to put chairs with this guy in charge. And I'm the one man saying, don't do it. So here is what happened. I tried to convince my friends, they're not interested because who are you? This guy is famous, he's at Columbia University, the dean likes him, the vice chancellor, all these guys like him, who are you? That kind of an attitude. And I'm saying, well, basically I have facts. Read my facts. Nobody has time to read the facts. So I started sending messages to Shankaracharya, but they were intercepted. They were going to have a very big announcement in New York, and they were going to announce Sheldon Pollock, all these things would happen, then it would be too late. So I had 90 days to interfere. So I told some friends who said, oh yeah, I know Shankaracharya, I'll send you their message, but none of that worked. And I was giving up because I was writing publicly and getting hit for writing all this, and no response from the Shringeri Mutt. And I thought maybe they're sold out. Then I got a call from a very dear friend whom I owe a lot, Rama Shankar. She's been a supporter of ours. She lives in Chicago. She says, I can get you a secret meeting with the Shankaracharya personally. So I said, how? So she said, my late father was the administrative head of the Mutt. There are two leaders in the Mutt. One is the spiritual leader, he is the one who is the Shankaracharya. And the other is the administrative leader, he is the bureaucratic leader. He does all the contracts, the payroll, the funding, like that. So her father was the administrative head before the current one. And go to the Shankaracharya, present your case. He doesn't meet too many people. He meets them only for 15 minutes, but you have to present your case. So I dropped everything. Time is running out. So I went to Bangalore. Her nephew was some guy in charge in the Bangalore airport. He organized a van, and it's a 10-hour drive in the middle of the night. This is through a jungle, and they have this leopard or cheetah or something like that. They have wildlife, they have elephants there. Very exciting all-night journey to go to Shringeri. And she said, don't stay near the mutt because he knows he's got his people and he'll know you. You stay a little bit away in a private hotel, totally incognito. And then she told me that next morning, don't go through the main gate, you go through a back door. She knew Shankaracharya's brother, who was a friend of theirs, family. He will receive me. He will take me privately to Shankaracharya's room. So when I was talking to Shankaracharya, he would keep interfering. So I would say to Shankaracharya, I've come all the way to discuss something very important about the legacy of this place, which is at risk. So he didn't know about any of this. He did not know this. They had done this deal without his knowledge. So you know, India is full of people, our own people betraying. Some people betrayed when the Muslims came, some betrayed when the British came. This was an inside job by this guy. So I know that Adi Shankara was very famous for doing what he called Purva Paksha, which means you must study the opposing point of view before you give a response. You must study the opposing point of view before you have a meeting with him. Before you say anything about him, you must study his work. And the current Shankaracharya is famous for Purva Paksha. He picked up that whole Purva Paksha from the Adi Shankara tradition, and he is supposed to be an expert. So I knew that I have to use the right words. So I said, there is an MOU with Sheldon Pollock to give him the authority in the Western world to represent Adi Shankara. Has any of your persons done Purva Paksha on Sheldon Pollock? I said, nobody from this organization has done Purva Paksha with the man, and you are doing an MOU with him, and that is wrong. So then I said, I just need a pause. Don't go and let this thing happen in 90 days. Give me some time. I'm writing a 100-page report doing my Purva Paksha on Sheldon Pollock. I'll give you my Purva Paksha and you can be the judge, adjudicate. You can call him and me and we'll have a debate, which is exactly what Adi Shankara used to do, have a debate with a neutral moderator, a neutral judge. And I said to Shankaracharya-ji, you be the judge and I will have a debate with him. And because I feel that he's dangerous, he's misrepresenting the tradition, he's very wrong, and we should not be doing this. So he's just told he didn't promise anything, but he told this guy, Gauri Shankar, not to proceed and he'll look into it. So I knew that this is very good for me. So in 2-3 months, my 100-page report had now become much bigger. And I needed more time. So I sent, through the same channel, I sent a draft and said, this is what I've written so far. Here is the executive summary. Because he reads English. He knows Hindi, he knows Sanskrit, very, very intelligent man. So I said, this is my finding, but I have more to say, but give me a little more time. So like that, I kept asking for more and more time, and I produced a 450-page book called The Battle for Sanskrit on this very issue. So the Shankaracharya decided to cancel that deal. The deal's cancelled. So you can see all the hatred and some of my friends because, it was very prestigious. They would all give money, and they would be with this committee and that board. They would be on Columbia University, and through that they would have so many appointments, and everybody would know them. It's all for shan, shaukat, showing off, ego, throw your money around. All that nonsense our people are into. And I'm alone fighting all this, and it is very unpopular. And when you are doing these things very unpopular, you're going to become controversial. So being controversial, you cannot avoid. So I have so many examples I could get into the impact we've made, but I know everybody's hungry probably. So let me give you one more example, which is this book called The Battle for IITs. Where is it? Here. Now, in the book, Snakes in the Ganga, very detailed theory of what the latest risks are, with latest threats. Previously, I wrote about Breaking India, but now this is Breaking India 2.0. And that book you can read, it'll tell you. Don't be, by the way, scared of the size, because if you read the introduction, which is 40-50 pages, then you read a 1-page summary of every chapter, then you will get the idea. In less than 100 pages, you will get the idea. The rest of the book is evidence to support. But if you want to know what's the idea, the thesis, you will get it in 100 pages. So when I wrote this book, one of the chapters, chapter 4, is what we've called Battle for IITs. And now we've expanded that into a whole book. That basically says there is an attack on IITs by this ultra-left wokeist people in Harvard who've made the case that IIT is all upper caste oppressing the lower caste. It is all Hindus oppressing Muslims. It is all majority oppressing minority. And it is continuing the elitism of India, the Hindu elitism of India into the next generation. And they are producing engineers who are mainly these upper caste Hindu type people, and they are excluding the others. And this is a form of oppression. This whole structure should be dismantled. So there's a anthropology philosopher, a professor called Ajanta Subramaniam, herself a Brahmin, at Harvard, fully tenured. She's written this book, published by Harvard University Press. So it became viral. Everybody in Harvard teaching courses on it, because after all, a professor from great university, Harvard University Press, must be correct. All over the United States and Europe, they're teaching this book on, a case study of casteism. And then this guy, Suraj Yengde, a Dalit scholar who's at Harvard Kennedy School, teams up and he begins to talk all about the history of atrocities, and he's become a big poster boy for Harvard, really taking this issue. And he's now a consultant for all the American think tanks, for the US State Department, for the Commission on Religious Freedom, for all their foreign policy, all that. He's sort of the sought after consultant because Harvard guy. And then there is something called Equality Labs in New York, run by one Saundarya Rajan, and they are into a lot of anti-Hindu activism. They took this idea and they claimed that they've done a survey in Silicon Valley of Indian tech workers who come from IITs, and they found that there are a lot of atrocities against the Dalit engineers by the Brahmin engineers. So this they feel is wrong and legal action should be taken. And then someone called Wilkerson, an African American herself, they took her to India to do research with the Ambedkarites, and she came back and wrote this book which basically became a bestseller, New York Times #1 bestseller. She's also won the Pulitzer Prize, and she was paraded all over, Oprah and everything. And the book basically says that caste is the origin of racism. Not only caste is same as racism, but caste originated the racism in America. Because she says, her argument is that when the British went to India, they studied Sanskrit. They became very fond of Sanskrit. And in the study of Sanskrit, they learned about racism through caste. They learned how to bring down the lower caste through Sanskrit. You exclude them from knowledge. You only allow Brahmins to have the knowledge. You don't allow these guys, Shudras and others, to have knowledge. And so this idea of oppression and how to deny them human rights starts with Sanskrit and Shastras. And these British, when they came to America, they started applying this lens and this framework to have prejudice against blacks, as if they never had any prejudice before. And so that is the caste influence on American racism. This is the idea. And then she says that Hitler got this from the British also. And so Hitler's Holocaust and all that is also of Indian origin. So this is her thesis. Pretty dangerous. So you combine an African American who writes this with the Harvard professor who says IIT is full of this casteism business, and this Suraj Yengde in the Kennedy School who says that one of his quotes that we have is that in 10 years, the Brahmins have killed 500,000 Dalits in India, murdered 500,000, murdered and raped 500,000. I mean, how you got this number? There's no evidence given, but he's a Harvard man, so people believe whatever he says. And then there is this Saundarya Rajan who does the research, claims to have done the research, factual data gathering, based on which she gets quoted. There must be 30, 40, 50 newspaper articles, Washington Post and Wall Street Journal, everybody quoting her survey, saying, wow, she's discovered this new thing, how horrible. Indians are bringing their caste racism into America. And they are products of IIT, and they're bringing it into Silicon Valley. So then to cap this whole thing, they filed a lawsuit against Cisco. Saying that Dalits are being prejudiced there's prejudice against the Dalit workers because of Brahmins. And the Brahmin they named is an IIT man, whom I know, I've talked to him. So he really in trouble. He's gone into hiding or something. So Cisco defended the case, but this is just a precedence. This kind of thing will go further. And now there are caste sensitivity workshops being taught in Microsoft, in Apple, in Amazon, etc., in Facebook. So I get calls from Indian tech workers in these companies in Silicon Valley saying, please come and help us because we don't know how to respond. We are being required to sit in workshops where these people come, Saundarya Rajan and Suraj Yengde, and they come and they go on talking about how horrible is caste and Hinduism is full of caste and this all comes from Vedic literature and all that. And this is why there was this dismantling Hindutva conference. This is the origin of that. It is not enough to fight. You have to know where it comes from. What is the root cause? This is the root cause of that, all of these kind of things that have been happening in the last few years. So we have uncovered something very new. And that is why we wrote the book Snakes in the Ganga, to tell you all this. So I went to Bay Area and I mentioned all this to Silicon Valley people. And they're all scared. Nobody has come out publicly. I said, shame on you. You are the IITians. I'm not an IITian. I'm defending you. But you're not defending yourself. And they're all into, the ones who are very rich don't want to stick their neck out because, it's too risky, they made their money, why should they fight? And the ones who are not rich tend to be junior and they are scared, they are on H-1B visa, they might be deported, they might be fired. So I was hosted for a lunch off the record by Google people, a whole lot of Google Indian engineers. They came and said, we'd like to have lunch with you privately. So they took me to some restaurant and we had a nice brainstorm for a whole afternoon. And they told me a lot of stuff, what's going on in their company and other companies. They didn't want to be named, so I don't want to name them. So this all went on. Then I found some venture capitalists with IIT background wanting to help me. So I said, I'm going to write this book which will take the matter in more detail. And this book is about 170 pages, so it's not that big. And I need sponsorship, I need help. So they said, okay, we'll look into that. Then I found a group of IITians in Washington, DC wanting to help. And Shashiji was kind enough, he went there, we had a fundraiser. So the IITians ex-IITians in Washington, DC have made a group to help us. So this book, Battle for IITs, the back cover has a huge endorsement from Ron Gupta, who is the president of Penn IIT USA, which is the organization of all the alumni. He's given the endorsement. So that's a big impact we've made. It's not just writing some book somewhere, but we've woken up the IIT worldwide organization. And they have now, the next week we are going to edit that video. We had a private dinner and they're all making very interesting statements and Q&A. So we are going to put that up online. And they've told me that they'll put it up on their website. So it'll get more publicity. They're also doing a review of this book, Snakes in the Ganga. And when that review comes out, they'll promote it in their newsletter to all the IITians worldwide. And in September, they're hosting a conference in Washington, bringing all the Pan-IIT people, all the leaders of all the IITs, and they want our book to be featured as the main theme of the conference. So this is So I could go on and give you a lot of examples of impact, but I think time has run out. So to just conclude with where are we now, what are we doing? We finished a 5-week tour for Snakes in the Ganga in India. We had about 25, 26 events all over. One of them was at IIT Madras, and we made a very nice video of IIT Madras faculty, very surprised at what the attack is, but very supportive of my view. And they have come out very strong, supporting me and against this whole Harvard mischief. And that's a video you should watch. It's about 1 hour long. And many other interesting things happened. Then we went to Canada for 5 days. Then we went to Boston. One of the events I had was in Harvard University Faculty Club in Boston with one of their senior professors, having an exchange with him. And this man supported me. He said, yes, Harvard has this problem because this liberal arts is very left-wing. And they are known to be like this. So he was quite open because he's not part of the group that I'm criticizing. They have their own politics, you know. You want to criticize these people from Harvard, you get those people on your side. That's how divide and rule works for us also. So we have to learn how to use it also. So then I went to Bay Area and so on. And now we are here. Next month on the 14th, 14th of February, myself, Vishwajit, who's our video head, some others, we are going to India for 35 days to launch 4 new books. 4 new books we're launching. So I told you about this battle for IITs. I told you about the Ravana book and the power of future machines. So now let me tell you, there is this book called Varna, Jati, Caste. This is a primer on the history of Indian social structures because there's so much nonsense, so much abuse, and our people get emotional or they give some little thing from here and there. But this is a book that 165 pages, everybody can read. It's very easy to written. It's for parents, it's for school children, it's for teachers, it's for everybody who is in Hindu society ought to have a copy of this. and it is just 250 rupees. So by the time it comes here, it will be like $7, $8, $9 or whatever it is, because we have to pay for air freight and whatnot, so maybe $10. So it's a very affordable book, very readable book. Everybody should read it. And this is written so that we are putting all the evidence together to counter the negative propaganda. And we are not chauvinistic. We are not saying we are a perfect society. We are not saying we have no flaws. We do have flaws, but so do other societies have flaws. But we also have solutions. And we want our problems to be taken in the context and not overdone. So I think I'm being reminded that lunch is going to be served. And thank you very, very much for listening. And I'll be happy to take question and answers. Jai Hind.
Thank you. Outstanding.
Thank you very much, Vibhuti Ji. Thank you very much, Devendra Ji and the organizers. I know that after this very scintillating evening, your mind is more on the lunch than on me. So I'm going to make it very, 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 very short. This critical race theory, or the wokeism, as Rajiv Ji has explained, I'm not going to go into what it is, but all that I can tell you is that this is like coronavirus. It is morphing into different variants. You see that in not only in academia, you see that in the public, civil society public discourse, you see that in public policies, you see that in the judiciary, and now in the corporate world. Finally, it has also now traveled to the international organizations. And that is what I represent, that I worked in the World Bank and the United Nations for almost 3 decades. And I saw it up close. November 2021, I saw an announcement on caste and development. And I was quite intrigued. This was a COVID time. And the World Bank people are very passionate, very dedicated, very committed about alleviating poverty and in the field of development. So at any point of time in the World Bank, you'll see some very exotic type of topics being discussed, exotic speakers coming. No topic is a taboo, no speaker is a taboo in the World Bank. So I thought this must be one of those. But what I found intriguing was the issue of caste and development. This speaker series and the training program was organized by the World Bank's Information Technology Department. Not by the social development, not by the economic development, but by the IT. So I was a bit intrigued. So I said, who are the people who are giving this training? And it was Equality Labs. I had never heard of them before. So I did some research. When I did the research, I was appalled at what they had been doing and who were funding them. And then I thought, if the World Bank is going to look at discrimination as a determinant of development, meaning that the discrimination influences, affects not only the economic development, but also the distribution of that benefit to the people, then obviously we should look at all kinds of discrimination. Discrimination is not just in caste. There's all kinds of discrimination. It's a religious discrimination, it is ethnic discrimination, it is class discrimination, it is the political affiliation and the family affiliation discriminant, ethnic discrimination. So I thought, why is the bank looking only at caste? Is there something behind that? So therefore, I wrote to this vice president, who was an old friend of mine, and I also copied it to all the board of directors. Bank has board of directors which represents 183 countries. So therefore, I wrote to all the board of directors saying that this is double standard. You should look at all the issues of discrimination, whether it is the developing country or whether it is the developed countries, whether it is the indigenous people in Canada whose graves are still being discovered, or it is Maoris and Aborigines in Australia, or it is the Native Americans right here in the US who have been exterminated, whether it is Yazidis and Kurdish in Iran and Iraq and Middle East, which I used to deal with, having worked in the bank and the UN, or whether it is the persecution of Hindus, Sikhs and Christians, which is almost Holocaust. It is the Holocaust proportion in Pakistan, Afghanistan and Bangladesh, which nobody is talking about. We are not talking about, why would we expect others to talk about? Uyghurs in China, the international organizations don't even have courage to open their mouth and talk about it. So therefore, I wrote to the board of directors saying that this is double standards. I got no response, but what happened was that in the very first program, I saw the Chinese executive director had sent a senior advisor to the program. They are more aware of the Swayam Bodh and the Shatru Bodh than we are. He was there, so that means it had been taken note of. Okay, let me just cut it short because now we are running short of time. All that I want to tell you is that once the World Bank picks up something like this, that then travels to other international organizations. It travels to the corporates that work with the World Bank. And then other organizations like Asian Development Bank, European Bank for Reconstruction Development, Inter-American Development Bank, all of these financial institutions will pick up that. And then what happens? It becomes a framework. It becomes a new framework for the hegemony of the developed countries and for imposing some of these policies onto the developing countries, the borrowing countries. Some borrowing countries cannot resist it because they are too weak, too vulnerable, but countries like India and China are not going to accept that. So therefore, you can see how very quietly these frameworks are created, and that is what is really happening in the international organizations. To conclude, I would say don't look at this as some esoteric academic discussion. It's not an esoteric academic discussion. This is a train which is coming down the track and is coming down very, very fast. Be aware of that. Read the books, equip yourself, teach your children, debate about it, and best of all, as Vibhuti Ji said, information and intellectual understanding and rationalization is a good starting point. But then you also have to act. You have to decide as to what steps are you going to take. Time to act is now. Failure is not an option. And all that I would try to do is evoke the imagery of Mahabharata, where Lord Krishna is standing in the middle of the battlefield, telling Arjuna to stand up and fight. Rajiv Ji is in the middle of the field of Mahabharata, and he's telling you, all of you Arjunas in this room, you are all Arjunas. Listen to Krishna and pick up your Gandiv. This is a time to stand up and fight. Join him. This is a battle of existence. This is a battle you will not get a second chance at. Rise up now, support him in that. Thank you very much.
So the first question, Rajiv Ji, is, in the beginning you talked about breaking India. You talked about the basic fabric of outside agents destroying the credibility and undermining Indian civilization. One of the things that has happened is our gurus are being attacked. And, either being put behind bars or thrown mud at it. Now, what is the strategy by which the opposite side is working on that, and what is our counter? How can we counter that? That's the first question.
So the question is, gurus are attacked, and what should be done about it? I hate to say this, but the gurus also take some blame, because the gurus, while teaching Gyan, have not been teaching Kshatriyata. Not only the gurus have not been teaching Kshatriyata, they have not been encouraging and supporting people like us who are doing that. So, in the old days, gurus would teach, mentor, advise the warriors, the Kshatriyas. After all, Dronacharya was a guru and he's training all these guys. But where are today's Dronacharya gurus? They're teaching how to get moksha. Moksha Gyan is one of the Gyans, but you have to also live like a householder. You have to live like a Kshatriya. You have to live like a Vaishya. There's many kinds of capacities and contexts in which people live. So gurus have to understand that if they avoid controversy and they avoid responsibility by saying, I'll only look after my business is to teach this particular topic and be successful. I don't want to stick my neck out for the rest of society. If the gurus feel that way, then when they are attacked, who's going to defend them? So I think gurus need to start playing a bigger role than just a limited teaching that they've been doing. That I think is the best strategy, because gurus have the resources, they have the credibility, and they have to up the game.
Great, thank you. The second question is, I'm going to combine two questions together. How should temples in the US, as well as Indian Americans, Hindu Americans, should counter the wokeism that you talk about and Hindu phobia, particularly in the Bal Vihar programs? So how do you talk about adults, but then how do you get this to the Bal Vihar type of setups?
So, we have for 30 years offered our services to come and conduct classes in temples, and the point is that they see it as a kind of a non-revenue producing activity. The temples like to have activities which produce revenue, which means devotion, bhakti. So, during a certain festival, they will have a lot of emphasis because people come and give a lot of money. Nobody's going to give money to learn these things. People have a hard time buying a book or giving a donation. But if we had a Deva Devi here, and we said, come and give money, they would give a lot more money for that. So people are more into giving for bhakti than to giving for knowledge. And so the temples have not picked up knowledge dissemination as a part of their portfolio because there is no money to be made. So the temple need to learn that they have a responsibility to do things which are not about getting more donations, but which are a part of their responsibility. They have to learn to do that.
Got it, thank you. Now this question, actually, I've combined three questions together. It's on Varna, Jati, Caste, this whole thing that you're talking about. So the idea is, someone's saying, well, how can Vedic framework unify Hindu society? Because for many years, we've been accused of casteism. That's part one. But related to that is, there's this idea that Shudras are always poor and they have been discriminated against by the Brahmins. But there were a lot of Shudra kings. So where does your book talk about that?
Yeah, the book talks about that. The book talks about a lot more. You should read this Varna Jati Caste. It's going to come out next month and we'll have thousands of copies brought to the US. So we talk about the 7 phases of history. From the Vedic phase, the Itihasic phase, the Dharma Shastra phase, the Islamic phase, the European rule phase, and so on. And each phase we discuss what is the state of affairs of Indian society, Indian social structure, and and this whole business of Shudra dynasty, Shudra kings is all part of that.
Great. Now, the current leadership of India, whether it's the current government or the infrastructure, do you think that they're capable or are able to clean the snakes in the Ganga?
No, not at all. Because I think they are increasing more snakes in the Ganga. Right, just now, in the last month, the BJP government announced that they are going to invite these Ivy Leagues from the West to set up campuses in India so that more snakes can be bred in India itself. You won't have to go to Harvard to get your degree and get the poison from the snakes because the snakes are coming to India. And the Indian government is doing it. They're doing it because the infiltration in the Indian policy making is so serious. The infiltration in Niti Aayog is very serious. In the ministries, it's very serious. In the corporate sector, it's very serious. So the poison has already spread. As the gentleman said before, it's like COVID keeps mutating. And so this poison is mutating and is spread into every segment of civic society in India. It hasn't spread into military, thank heavens, but maybe it will get there next. So the Indian government it's not so easy for the government to get rid of these kind of things.
Got it, thank you. Now, I have 2 more questions. The second to last question is about younger people. So there are people who are saying that basically our Gurukul system used to impart knowledge, prepare future, like gurus used to do, right? Now, what do we do with young population now, which is college students, high school students, and young professionals? How do you equip them like with the snakes in the Ganga type of knowledge to fight back?
So I think this is the role for organizations like Hindu Student Council. It is a role for groups like, the Bal Vihar of Chinmaya Mission. They need to expand the curriculum beyond just teaching Gita. Because these people learn Gita and then they're sitting in school and somebody makes fun of their tradition and they don't know what to say. And so the knowledge should be not only how to be a Hindu privately, but how to be a Hindu socially and publicly. Because if you are hiding from your identity in front of friends and other people, then you are not going to be practicing your dharma. You have to be confident enough publicly And the various gurus and various organizations are not teaching how to face the issues and confront them confidently in the public. That teaching is not happening.
Okay, next, the last question is a two-part question. First part is, someone wants to say, is there plan to translate into regional languages, the snakes in the Ganga? And how can people support that? Someone can say that they want to fund translations.
So, you know, we have a Hindi translation team. We need funding for that. We have 4 people in the team in India, and they're translating. It will take them a long time to translate one book at a time and so on. And there are people who like to translate. We have translated several of our books into Tamil, into Kannada, and into Gujarati, 1 or 2 books. So the translation costs money. Everybody says, why don't you do this? Why don't you do that? Well, why don't you put your money where your mouth is? You write us a check of enough. It takes a lot of effort to translate a book. It looks simple, but very few people have a good translation capability. One of the best books translated by us, for us, was done by Devendra Singh.
Yeah.
Devendra Singh translated Being Different, and that became Vibhuti Jha. They're one of the best translations. Each one of these translations takes 3 years of work. And then you have to verify it and test it and typeset it and translate the documents, the diagrams. So it's not a very simple job. And you need to put money. That is what we need the investment for.
Great. And the final question is, this is from someone who is young as well. How do they get involved?
The young people, if you want to be a volunteer, you write to us and say, this is my credentials, this is how much time I can give as a volunteer. And we will turn you over to somebody called Divya Reddy in Bangalore. She manages all the young volunteers worldwide. And they'll give you work to do, they'll nurture you, they'll mentor you. Once in a while, we'll have video conferences. So there's a whole program. But it's up to you. If you're a serious volunteer, contact us and then we'll put you in touch with the right people. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rajiv Ji. There are many questions and I'm sure we can go on for a long time, but we're running short on time. So what we're going to do next is the book signing.
I'd like to give thanks first of all to Ishwar. Actually not thanks, I think we should be indebted to him that we were able to do this function. Second, thanks should go to Rajiv Malhotra ji, who has mesmerized us with his wisdom and all the hard work that he is doing for last 30 years. Shashi ji came from Dallas. Vibhuti ji came from Long Island to do our Master of Ceremony program. And also my colleagues who had faith in me that all I did is like stoke their passion. And after that, all the work was done.